Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to our final Awana lesson of April. I hope you're all doing well. I know it's been a long April. A lot of you have been cooped up inside your houses. I hope you all had fun watching Miss Laura's video on Sunday, where she got to go to the alpaca farm and show you some different animals. And today, actually, we're going to have a similar lesson where we are going to talk about animals and about God's creation. So I hope you enjoy the lesson this week. I hope you're all having fun with your families and continuing to study in your Bibles and memorize your Awana verses. All right, so today our lesson is about Christ's amazing creatures. And some of you boys and girls who have been in my and Mrs. Katie's 3rd and 4th grade Sunday school class, you probably remember us talking about some of these different animals. And one of the things that we like to do in our class is to show you boys and girls different animals that God has designed and created that are simply amazing. And the things that they do and the things that God designed them to do, how to survive in their different environments, how He designed their bodies to work, is completely amazing. And it shows the power and the glory of God. And so today we're going to look at that. And it's important because some of you boys and girls may see on TV or hear in some of your science classes in public schools about the idea of evolution. And there's some people who don't believe that God created everything in our world. But these creatures are so powerful that they show, without a shadow of a doubt, that they couldn't have happened by accident. They couldn't have been chance. Their bodies, the way they function, are so specifically designed that it all points to an amazing creator who is our God. So our verse of the week this week is actually a passage from the book of John. And this is what shows where we get the idea of Christ's creatures from. And most of you boys and girls know this from your Awana book. But John 1:1-3 says this: "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made." And so you boys and girls know from Sunday school and from Awana that the Word was Jesus Christ, right? And He was there. He was part of the Trinity from the very beginning with God. And verse 3 tells us all things were made by Him. All right, so that's where we get the idea of Christ's creatures. Jesus Christ, who is there with God the Father in the very beginning in Genesis, He created all these animals. And He designed them and put all His intelligence into them so that these creatures are able to live and to survive in our world. Not only to survive, but to thrive. And so when we talk about the word creature, what that means, boys and girls, is a created living thing. And everything we see on our earth, every animal from the smallest tiny ant to the greatest sized blue whale, every single one of them was created and designed by God. And so when we look at these animals today, what we're going to see is all these animals were created by an intelligent, all-knowing God. And we are going to see that they were perfectly designed, that they're very complex, right? These aren't simple blobs of material just floating around. These are amazing machines that are designed and put together with complicated pieces so that they can work and they can survive. If evolution was true and all these animals came about by chance, you wouldn't see this complexity. You wouldn't see these amazing systems in them. You would have to have slow, small changes over a long, long period of time. And so all these animals that we look at are amazing evidence for a God who created and loves us. All right, who can tell me what today's first Christ creature is? If you guessed the bombardier beetle, you are correct. And this is an amazing creature who's one of the only ones on our earth who has the ability to shoot exploding chemicals out of his rear end as a defense. So if there's a bird that's trying to eat this guy, or there's another creature who's trying to pick a fight with them, this bombardier beetle has the ability to shoot little tiny explosions out of a gun on his rear end, and he's able to defend himself that way. And the amazing thing is, boys and girls, that these two chemicals are created inside his body in separate tanks, and he is able to control how they are pushed out together to cause these explosions. And so as you can see in this diagram right here, he has two little factories inside his body that create these different chemicals. One factory creates hydrogen peroxide and the other one creates hydroquinone. And when these two chemicals are pushed together out of its rear end at the exact same time, it creates an explosion with gas that gets up to 212 degrees. Now, boys and girls, the crazy thing is, if this happened by accident and somehow a little beetle had these two chemicals created inside of his body, what do you think would happen? He would turn into a bomb, right? The beetle himself would explode. So God had to design these special tanks that are lined with asbestos, and the chemicals are stored inside his body in separate tanks, and they only mix together once they're shot out of his rear end. And another thing is that he has the ability to direct where he shoots these bombs. And so if he didn't have that, if he didn't have the ability to control which way it was pointing and shooting at his ambush, his attacker, then he could accidentally shoot off one of his legs, and he wouldn't be able to survive that either. So these creatures are so amazing. Here's a picture of one person trying to stop him, trying to put his finger in his path. And guess what? If you try and do that, you are going to get an explosion that is going to cause quite a burn. All right, all you boys and girls are very familiar with this next Christ creature, which is the giraffe. Now, how many of you boys and girls have been to the Cleveland Zoo and have seen the giraffes there? They're amazing. These giraffes are one of God's most unique creatures in the fact that they are so tall. And some giraffes, they have necks that reach up to 9 foot tall. So if you boys and girls are sitting in your house right now, look from the floor to the ceiling, and if you picture a giraffe's neck, it is at least that tall. So these are amazing, amazing creatures. But the problem with the neck that tall is that God had designed special systems in order for the giraffe to survive. Because his neck is so tall, in order to get blood all the way up to his brain, God had to design the giraffe with an extra strong heart. And so that strong heart pumps massive amount of blood all the way up the giraffe's neck and into his brain. But the problem is, boys and girls, when a giraffe needs to go down and get a drink from a watering hole, he tilts his head down, right? And so if his heart pumped all that blood downhill into his brain when he was getting a drink, the blood would rush to his head and he would pass out right there by the water and most likely get eaten by a lion or a cheetah or another animal. So God had to design inside of his neck special valves that control the blood as it's going up and down. And when he bends down to go get a drink, those valves shut off and help the giraffe to keep too much blood from rushing to his brain. Sponge designed in the back of his brain. And that sponge, when he's going down, bending down to drink, it soaks up some of the blood so he can have blood to his brain while he's drinking. And then when he stands back up, he's able to get his bearings and still be okay and not pass out and fall over. So it's just another amazing example of a system inside a creature's body that God had to design in order for them to be able to survive. There is no way that this could have happened by accident or that all these things could have come together in order for the giraffe to survive unless it was designed by an intelligent God. Which one of you boys and girls thinks you can guess what this next Christ creature is? If you guessed the Arctic plover, then I am impressed because this is an odd little bird who lives up in Alaska. And you might be thinking, oh, Mr. Pitek, what's so crazy about this bird? He's just a simple little bird, about the size of a dove, not very heavy. But this bird makes an amazing journey every year from Alaska all the way to Hawaii. And the amazing part about this is he travels over 2,400 miles over the Pacific Ocean, which is the largest ocean in the world. And if you boys and girls have a globe at home, you can take that and look on the globe, find Alaska, find Hawaii, and look at the crazy amount of ocean that this tiny little bird has to fly over in order to get away from Alaska for the winter and to spend the winter in Hawaii. This requires the bird to fly for 88 hours nonstop. Boys and girls, that is 3 days and 4 nights of nonstop flying. Could you imagine if you had to go on a trip and you had to walk for 3 days and 4 nights straight? I don't think we could do it. But God designed them so that before their trip, they eat a bunch of food and get ready for it. And they end up with 70 grams of fat, which is 1/3 of their body weight that they burn on this trip. So if you boys and girls weigh about 40 pounds, 50 pounds, you can imagine this journey would make you lose 15 pounds, which is crazy, crazy. And another amazing thing is that without a flight pattern, this bird would run out of energy 500 miles before he got to Hawaii. So most of you boys and girls have seen how birds will fly in a V before. And that is programmed into their brains. They are designed by God with the ability that they know that when they're going on a long migration, if they fly in that pattern, the way that they're set up and the aerodynamics of it, they were able to conserve energy. And so one bird goes in the front of that V and flies for a while, and then he drops to the back, and the next bird goes to the front. And by working together and flying in this special pattern, these birds are able to make it safely to Hawaii. Another amazing thing is that the mom and dad birds lay their eggs. They have 4 eggs typically that they lay in Alaska, and then the mom and dad take off and fly to Hawaii. So these baby birds are not very old at all, and they are on the journey where they have to make it from Alaska all the way to Hawaii. And guess what? They've never been there before. They don't even have their parents to follow. So God has designed inside of their brains an amazing GPS system where they can make this journey across this huge ocean, flying for 88 hours nonstop, and they can land in Hawaii in the same area as their parents without anyone to guide them or anything to show them the way. All right, this next creature is one that you boys and girls may see out and about in the springtime in a field near your house. Any guesses? This is a monarch caterpillar, which one day will turn into a monarch butterfly. And the amazing thing about these creatures is that God designed the monarch butterfly to know to lay their eggs on a specific plant called the milkweed plant. And when the caterpillars hatch from their eggs, they eat this plant and it creates their body, these chemicals inside their body that make them poisonous. So they're brightly colored so that birds or any other predators know, stay away from me. If you try and eat me, you'll be poisoned. And one of the amazing things that people don't realize is that when these caterpillars are ready to turn into a butterfly, they spin a chrysalis. Maybe some of you boys and girls have seen that before or done a science experiment where you have a chrysalis or a cocoon and watch the caterpillar turn into a butterfly. But what you don't see is that inside of that chrysalis, these caterpillars break down their body. And we're going to look at a picture of what that looks like. And God designed them inside their genes. They have the information for their body to break apart and then to completely reorder itself as a butterfly. And so here's a picture of a caterpillar spinning a chrysalis. And like I said, what you can't see inside is that once the caterpillar is inside this chrysalis, he completely breaks his body down. And if you look at a picture of the caterpillar now, look at how many legs he has. Look at his antenna. Look at his long, round body. Once inside that chrysalis, if you crack open a chrysalis, you will find this green monster inside. And this is a caterpillar in the process of turning into a butterfly. And it's not what you would think. It's not like he goes into there and he magically grows wings or magically changes shape. His body is programmed by God with DNA that instructs him inside the chrysalis to break down into a green goop. And then his body completely rebuilds itself into a beautiful butterfly. And if you boys and girls look at this picture, you can see, look at how different this butterfly is from the caterpillar that he started out as, right? Look at his long wings. Look at his long legs and antennas and his long tongue that he uses to drink nectar. Once the butterfly comes out of his chrysalis, he flies off and he knows, because he's been designed and programmed by God, that now he doesn't want to eat milkweed. He needs to find flowers, right? And so he knows that he flies the flowers, he uses his long tongue to drink nectar, and he is able to survive and thrive in his new body. I bet most of you boys and girls know what this next creature is. You all know he's a penguin, but does anyone know what type of penguin? If you guessed the emperor penguin, you are correct. And the amazing thing about the emperor penguin is these are possibly one of the greatest parents of all the animal kingdom. And the reason for that is the dads, what they do for their eggs is that during the winter down in Antarctica where these penguins live, they will keep their egg on their feet for 2.5 months. Now, I know most of you boys and girls just had Easter and you probably played with some Easter eggs. If you still have an Easter egg laying around your house, try and put it on your feet and balance it on there and see if you could last for maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Then imagine if you were an emperor penguin, you would have to hold your new baby, your egg, on your feet for 2.5 months. And God designed the emperor penguin that they know they have to keep this egg right at 95 degrees in order for the baby to survive. If they drop this egg on the cold ground in Antarctica, the baby won't be able to survive. And it gets in the winter in Antarctica, it gets to minus 100-degree temperature. And so these dads, they will hold onto their eggs, keep their eggs on their feet throughout the whole winter for 2.5 months. And right as soon as winter's done, the moms will come back at the exact same time that the babies hatch from their eggs, and they will feed them with fish that they throw up out of their mouths to feed them with. And so these parents are an amazing team. The fact that they are able to keep these eggs off the ground, keep them warm, and that the moms know the exact time to come back and to feed their babies is just amazing. Another amazing thing about penguins is that they were designed to swim in the water. A lot of people who don't believe in creation will try and speculate that the penguin was a type of bird that maybe never learned how to fly and so he had to learn how to swim. But that's not true. His body was specifically designed for swimming in the water. His feathers that he have keep him warm down in those freezing temperatures down in Antarctica and in the freezing water that they live in. And so he's just another amazing example of a creature who is designed by God. All right. Now, some of you boys and girls might look at this next picture and think that there's actually two creatures here, right? It looks like a tiny little fish, like a minnow, and then like an oyster-like creature below it, right? Actually, this is one animal, and it's called the Lampsilis mussel. And what you boys and girls are seeing on top of him there is actually a lure that he has that's part of his body. And so he has a flap of skin that God designed just like a fishing lure. Some of you boys and girls who are into fishing, you know what it's like, right? You have a little fake fish or a little plastic piece that looks like a fish that you try and use. And the Lampsilis mussel has his own fishing lure designed by God. Now, the reason he uses it is not what you might think. You might think that he likes to eat fish and he needs the lure to bring him in close. But actually, what he needs the fish for is to house his eggs and to keep his eggs warm. Because these mussels live in rivers where if they tried to lay eggs on the riverbed, the water would sweep their eggs away. So the Lampsilis mussel knows, the mom mussels know when it's time to lay their eggs, they need to use that lure to draw in a fish. And once the fish gets close enough, when it comes in for a bite on the lure, they will shoot their eggs into the mouth of the fish. And that fish will carry the baby eggs of the Lampsilis mussel until they hatch. And so as soon as these eggs hatch, little tiny mussels fall out of the fish's mouth back down to the riverbed where they can survive. And boys and girls, this is just a mind-boggling creature that you can't even imagine that something like that exists in rivers. But he has all these systems that the only way it would be possible, the only way he could exist, is if God designed him with the fishing lure, as if God designed him with the knowledge that he knew that she needed to lay her eggs inside of a fish's mouth. And so it's just another amazing example. Most of you boys and girls probably know what this next creature is. Some of you might have a feeder farm outside of your house. It's the hummingbird. And if you ever have a chance in the spring or this summer to see the hummingbirds flying around, You will be amazed. These creatures are more mobile than any machine that humans have created. Boys and girls have seen that we've created helicopters, we've created airplanes, but nothing that us humans have made can fly backwards, forwards, or upside down like the hummingbird can. And God designed the hummingbird so that he can beat his wings super fast. And in order to do that, he needs to have a heart that's super powerful and fast. And so God designed the hummingbird so that his heart can beat up to 1,200 times per minute. And that means that he needs to visit as many as 2,000 flowers in one day just so he has enough energy to be able to fly and to survive. The other amazing thing about the hummingbird is that his wings move in a figure-8 motion, completely unlike any other seen. These are completely like any other creature we've seen. His wings go in a figure-8 pattern, up and down and back and forth, which is what allows him to fly backwards, upside down, this way, that way, and it's completely amazing. And there's no other creature like him. The only way that he could have these bones and these joints inside of his body for him to move his wings like this is if they were designed by a super intelligent creator. And we know that that was God. This next creature is found in the ocean. Any guesses? This is the Portuguese man of war. And if you boys and girls guessed that, you are pretty smart. And the amazing thing about this guy is that he is actually not one creature. He is a colony of different creatures all working together to survive. And so the amazing thing is that up top, where you see where he's floating on the water, is a single creature called a float polyp. Then down below, underneath, you have stinging polyps, which he uses to sting and to paralyze fish. Then he has tentacles that he'll use to grab the fish and bring them up to his body. And he has feeding polyps that can grab the fish and digest the fish so that he can provide nutrients for the rest of the creatures in the system. And the amazing thing about these guys is that they can grow tentacles up to 200 feet long out in the ocean. And the fact that these creatures can work together and to survive in this colony, the only way it could be possible is if it was designed by God. If you had the crest creature, the float polyp, all by himself floating out in the ocean, guess what would happen? He wouldn't be able to get food and survive, right? If you had the stinging polyps, the tentacle polyps, all by themselves, they wouldn't be able to survive either, right? They would fall right to the bottom of the ocean. If you had the float and the stinging tentacles, but not the gastrointestinal polyps, they wouldn't be able to feed itself. And so all these different creatures have to work together in order for the system to work. And it's an amazing colony of creatures that had an amazing designer. Now, most of you boys and girls probably know this one. Woody the Woodpecker, right? And the woodpecker, if you think about what he does day in and day out, is he bangs his head right up against a tree trunk. Now, I don't want any of you boys and girls to try this out, but just imagine in your head if you went outside your house, found a tree, and decided to bang your head against it. What do you think would happen? You would give yourself a concussion, right? You wouldn't be able to survive that. The only way that the woodpecker is able to survive is that he was specifically designed by God to be able to drill into trees and to get his food. And so he has one of the sturdiest beaks of any bird. His beak and his skull are super thick and strong so that he can pound against that tree branch and put holes in the tree so that he can collect ants and little bugs that live inside the tree. He also has specially designed feet that allow him to grab onto a tree branch or onto a tree trunk and to hold himself in place while he pounds his head against the tree. He also has a shock absorber inside his skull that keeps his brain from smashing against his skull and giving him a concussion and causing him to knock himself out. Another amazing thing that God designed is his tongue. And on inside of the woodpecker's tongue are little tiny barbs. His woodpeckers actually wraps all the way around his brain and comes out the front where he can reach into a hole in a tree to grab little tiny ants. And his tongue has little tiny harpoons in it that will stick the ants. And he has sticky saliva also that he will use. And the ants will stick to that and he can suck them back into his mouth. And that is how he gets his dinner. Our final Christ creature for today is one of my favorite. How many of you boys and girls can guess what this creature is? This is the majestic blue whale, the largest creature that God has created. This guy is larger than any of the dinosaurs. He is the biggest beast on earth. And the amazing thing about the blue whale is his size and the systems that God designed in his body for him to be able to function this big. He is up to 109 foot long. Boys and girls, we're going to look at a picture on the next slide that shows how big that is. But these guys are massive. He weighs up to 290,000 pounds. His heart is the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, which if you boys and girls have heard of a punch bug car, that's one of those cars, okay? And his heart is so large to provide blood to his body that it's the size of a car, and one of you boys and girls could actually crawl through one of his arteries inside his heart. That is how big God designed his heart. In order to survive, he needs to eat 40 million krill in one day. That is 8,800 pounds of little tiny shrimp-like creatures that are called krill. And it's amazing that God designed the largest creature in all the earth, that he actually feeds and lives off of one of the tiniest creatures. But thankfully, God knew that our oceans are completely full with krill, and he can find up to 40 million of them in a day for him to eat. The only way that this creature could survive, boys and girls, is if he was designed to be this big. And most of you boys and girls know that whales are mammals, right? And that they breathe air, which according to evolution doesn't make sense, right? They have a long, crazy series of creatures that they think it took to get to a whale, but the bottom line is that none of it adds up. The only way this creature came to be is if his body was specifically designed by God to be able to be this large and to be able to survive in the ocean. Here's a picture where you can see the actual size of a blue whale. So you can see the little scuba divers up above there. You can see a guy standing below, even a triceratops, a tank, even a school bus. Look at the size of this whale. Completely amazing. Another amazing thing about these animals is that people have used God's design in animals for things that we create. And there's a field of science that's called biomimicry. And what that means is that engineers, people who are building things in our world, they will use animals to copy their design for different things they build. And so you can see in this picture, there's a whale's fin, which has ridges on it, and some super smart engineers actually copied that and used it to make a new wind turbine for a windmill to make power. Another example is the gecko, right? God designed the gecko with super sticky suction cups on his feet so he can run all over the place. And now we have new shoes today, and some of you boys and girls may have seen these. You may even have a pair of them, but they have been designed copying the gecko's feet. Another common thing you guys use every day that was copied from God's design is Velcro, right? Some of you probably have shoes with Velcro on them. And the way that scientists and engineers came up with Velcro was copying little burrs, which some of you boys and girls have maybe walked through a field before and had these burrs get stuck on your socks or stuck on your pants or your coat. And when scientists looked at them with a microscope, they saw little tiny barbs that were latching on. And that was where they came up with the idea for Velcro. Another example is in Japan. They have a bullet train, which is one of the fastest trains on earth. And they came up with the design copying the bill of the kingfisher, which is one of the fastest birds who's able to use his nose and dive straight down into the water to grab fish. And finally, a lot of our airplanes have used birds for design, right? And so we know that God has designed these creatures with the ability to have flight. Before Before us humans created airplanes, birds were flying, right? And so we had to use God's design in order to copy it, to come up with a way to create these amazing machines that we see all around us. And so all these things that we see all around our world, boys and girls, are examples of God's amazing creation and examples of Him everywhere we look. So in conclusion, boys and girls, I just want you to know with this lesson that all the amazing creatures we look at, everything you boys and girls see out in our world and in our amazing universe, could not have happened by chance. No matter what you boys and girls hear, no matter what you're told, you are not an accident. You were created by an all-knowing, all-loving God who has a plan for your life. God has revealed Himself to us through His creation. And the Bible tells us that people are without excuse if they choose not to believe in Him. Another verse I want to go over this week is Romans 1:20, and it says this, "For the invisible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse." So boys and girls, we are without excuse not to see God's amazing design in these creatures. God wants us to be bold, to tell people about Him, to tell people about His creation. And then the amazing thing, boys and girls, is that you were created even more special than the animals. Our Bible tells us that God designed Adam and Eve, that He built Adam out of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. And so, boys and girls, you are not just an animal. You are not a monkey. You are not an ape. You are designed in the image of the Almighty God, of a Creator, and He loves you, and He has a plan for your life, and He wants you to know Him and to love Him and to serve Him. So if you boys and girls take anything away from this lesson today, please know that you are special in God's eyes and that He loves you and cares for you very much. I'm going to say a prayer, and then we will listen to some kids saying some sections. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for our lesson time today. I thank you for all the boys and girls who tuned in and were able to watch this. We thank you so much for all of these amazing creatures, all the things that we see across the world, Lord, that show your power and your glory. I ask that you please help these boys and girls to know that they are created by you and that they are loved by you and that you have an amazing and wonderful purpose for their life. I ask that you please keep them all safe and healthy over the next few weeks. Help bring us back together at our church soon, Lord. And we love you so much. In Christ's name, amen.
Ephesians 5:1-2. Be therefore followers of God's dear children and walk in love, as God has also loved us. And God has given Himself for an offering and for a sacrifice to God for a sweet-smelling savor.
Mark 16:15. Go, and He said unto them, Go ye into all the world, and preach the gospel to every creature.
Joshua 24:15. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord.
Colossians 4:2. Continue in prayer and watch, and the same with thanksgiving.
All right. Thank you to all you boys and girls for watching today. Thank you to all you parents who have kept your children participating in the program. Thank you for the videos you've sent. Thank you for the emails telling us what your kids have been accomplishing. Please continue to work with them on their Awana books. You can sign their sections for them. You can email us at awanagbc-1@yahoo.com. We know that they all put a ton of work in this year in memorizing their Bibles and studying their sections, and we want to make sure that they're rewarded for that. So we're not sure what's going to happen in May here. We may be able to get back together again at church, but if that's not the case, then we're still going to make sure that the boys and girls get their awards, that they get their trophies. We'll probably do one of these videos where we announce who finished their book and make sure that everyone gets their proper awards. I'm so proud of you boys and girls, and I hope that you all have a great week and stay safe and healthy.